Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to talk about watercolor paper sizing, when it goes bad, and what you can do about it. And I'm also going to walk you through this time-lapse of this tutorial that is now up, available on Critique Club. I'm starting off using Albright Durer watercolor pencils on fluid 100% cotton watercolor paper with a hot press finish, which basically means the paper is nice and smooth. I started off by sketching here with these watercolor pencils, and if you know Albright Durer watercolor pencils, they are extremely high quality, vibrant watercolor pencils. And when I originally designed this project, I thought this would be great to do for my new creative colored pencil course. But then I decided, because of the weirdness with the sizing and the amount of working around I had to do with it, it would be better suited to Critique Club, and I'm doing something else with watercolor pencils that is more in line with some other projects I have going on with that. So this is in Critique Club. If you would like to find it, I'll have a link in the video description so you can check it out if you want. And so when I'm working with watercolor pencils, I'll generally sketch each portion in its most local color. So I'm doing the legs in like a burgundy, I'm doing the body in kind of a light blue, and sketching, I'm kind of filling in with color here and there where I see it, like the bright yellows. And I was thinking this will be great because these watercolor pencils are so vibrant. I'll be able to lay down tons of color with this and then just touch it up with some regular colored pencils, some wax-based or oil-based colored pencils, just, something that's not a water-soluble one. And the coloring down went great. I didn't notice anything was amiss, and you'll see what bad sizing paper looks like as soon as I add water to this. So what is sizing? Sizing is basically a coating that is applied to the exterior of a paper. Now, most of your art papers, your watercolor papers that are meant for painting on, will have an internal sizing as well. So that basically means they've put some sort of kind of like a glue in the paper pulp itself. They've blended it up with either the cotton or the wood pulp, whatever they've made the paper out of, and so it's kind of impregnated into the pulp fibers. And then after they've made their sheets of paper, then they coat it again on both sides, usually both sides, not always, with either a gelatin or a plant-based or synthetic sizing. And that's, again, it's like a glue, or almost like a thin varnish or something to keep your paint from seeping in. It's almost like a starch, really. If you've ever starched fabric so that you could paint on it, it's like a starch. And so here I'm adding the water, and look at how pale those colors are. It was at this moment I realized the sizing had gone bad on this paper. This paper was absolutely fine a year ago, and it had sat on my shelf in the room of hoard, which is where basically a big supply storage area, and dealt with the fluctuations of humidity and temperature that we get in our main basements, and it was definitely worse for the wear. So I didn't know what I was going to do here because the colors weren't vibrant, but I thought, well, let me see if I can build up some color. So I'm just adding color from the tip of the pencils with a brush, like you would if you were, there's just another way that you could use watercolor pencils, but the color wasn't there. And this is very abnormal for Albright Durer pencils. They are probably, if I had to pick just a watercolor pencil, not just a water-based, but watercolor pencil, I would say Albright Durer are probably the best ones I've used. My favorite water-soluble pencils would probably be the Inktense, honestly, but they're not a technical watercolor. They're more of like a dye. So I'm like, all right, we gotta pivot. So I'm using this brush pen. This is it's a pen that's filled with a fountain pen safe permanent ink, like a India ink that's safe for fountain pen. So I put it in this brush pen figuring it will be fine, and it is. I don't unfortunately have a resource for this pen. It was from Ohuhu, who released it many years ago, and it's lovely, but they've never brought it back. So I think probably the closest thing would be the Pentel brush pen that a lot of marker artists use, that just something waterproof basically. And so I went over and I outlined my drawing and added some details with a pen so at least I could get those lines back. And I decided that I was going to go back in with Inktense. So Inktense actually will work fine on watercolor paper where the sizing has gone bad. The Inktense blocks specifically. The formulation of the Inktense blocks and the Inktense pan paints are thicker. It's almost gouache-like. It's almost like it's very matte. It's very vibrant, and the colors will lay down on anything. It will work great on fabric, which is extremely porous and unsized. So if it's going to work well on that, it's going to work well on other other surfaces that are lacking sizing. Also, anything that would work well on rice paper is going to work fine on unsized watercolor paper or watercolor paper where the sizing has gone bad. So if you have sumi-e products, if you have Eastern style watercolors, that would be a good option because they're thicker, they have more body to them. Gouache also will work just fine on unsized paper because you can use gouache in a sketchbook and it's like a mixed media sketchbook or even just a thickly like cardstock paper and it's going to be fine. So just try to think of thicker media that does not necessarily need to blend on the surface, you know, something that's got a little bit more body to it that would sit atop the surface rather than blend in. So like even acrylic paints would work fine on unsized paper. And I'm doing a little bit of texturing on the rock, and you can see those like those drops, especially that I flicked off of the toothbrush. They're sitting on top. So even though Inktense is inky, it acts more like a gouache in this situation where it doesn't absorb into the paper. It just kind of sits on top. So that would be my first advice. And of course, any dry media is going to be beautiful on your watercolor paper where the sizing has gone bad. Because still, you've got to appreciate that is still high quality paper. If you have Arches paper or any 100% cotton paper or even a good cellulose paper, it's still high quality paper. It's just one component of the paper has gone bad, making it not very useful for what you bought it for, which is a bummer. But if you use other medium, it is definitely salvageable. Colored pencil, it doesn't matter how sized your paper is for colored pencil. In fact, it might even grip a little bit better if you wanted to use colored pencil on it. Pastel, oil, or traditional will work great on that paper. And if all else fails, you could do a little work to the paper. You could add a coat of gesso to it, and you could use it for acrylics or oils. You could add a coat of watercolor ground to it if you really wanted to use that for watercolor paper, watercolor painting. That will work great. I have used the Daniel Smith brand of watercolor ground. To be fair, I use it more as a whiteout than an actual watercolor ground because I don't particularly like painting on the watercolor ground, like a whole painting. So that's not what I would do with it, but it's certainly an option. It's kind of a little bit like painting on a watercolor canvas or like an aqua board. If you like that texture, then you probably will like watercolor ground just fine. And, you know, I've only used Daniel Smith brand. I haven't used any other because it's going to take me a lifetime to get through the one that I have. Now here at this point, you're going to see me put on a coat of clear gesso. Clear gesso is a acrylic-based product that has a grit to it that I absolutely love for using with colored pencil. And it's also wonderful under pastel. It's a great way to make kind of a cheaper paper behave like an expensive paper. Now the caveat to the clear gesso rather, is that it's going to make your dark colors lighter and hazier. So you can see that crab there, how much lighter it looks here in this clip than it did in the last one. But for me, it was a trade-off. It was worth it. I wanted to have a nice gritty surface that I know my pencils will stick to, because although the Inktense blocks are matte, they're not as gritty as gouache paint when they dry. And I just wanted to make sure that those colored pencils that I'm using were going to hold up and show up on top of it. And the clear gesso is just, it's magic. And it's Liquitex brand clear gesso. And I want to stress that because not all clear gessos seem to have that grit to it. And clear gessos are going to be fine for sealing something that you want to paint on with acrylics or oils. That's going to be fine. But if you want it for using with pastels or with colored pencil, any dry media, getting the Liquitex brand is worth the extra couple bucks, if it even costs more. And if you did end up buying a gesso and it didn't work because it wasn't Liquitex and it was just too smooth, you can put some baking soda in it to give it that grit, but I don't know. It shouldn't make it acidic, shouldn't make your paper acidic because baking soda is a base, not an acid. But then again, I don't know about the archivability of that. It's just a workaround if you want to use that product for this use and you have it on hand. I mean, for that matter, you could even use like a matte Mod Podge and add some baking soda to it. There are recipes online for watercolor grounds and gesso and clear gesso and all of that. If you want to take a gamble and try one of those, go for it. I have just, I've tried a few and I haven't found any that I would recommend. So that's my experience, and you can obviously do whatever you like. I like the luminosity and richness that I get from the pencils over the Inktense and over the gesso, and I think it's a really great way to mix your medium. So let's talk about the plus side of having paper that's gone bad. And you're probably thinking, Lindsay, Pollyanna, what are you doing trying to spin this? But listen to me. When you've had paper that's gone bad, that's going to make you really think about what supplies you're buying, how much you're buying, and how much you're painting. If you know that that precious paper you bought that was expensive might go bad before you even get a chance to use it, that's going to light a fire on you and make it not so precious. You're going to know it's to use it or lose it, right? So that can encourage you to actually use what you have. Another bonus of having the poorly sized paper is that it can give you the freedom to experiment with techniques and media that you never would quote unquote waste a good piece of paper on, right? So it gives you that freedom. I always find when I open up a sketchbook, and there's always that page where something happened, you spilled something or you dropped a marker or whatever, and you've got a page in your sketchbook that's got a smear on it. I always find it so freeing to use those pages because I have no expectation of how that work is going to come out. So no matter what I do on this, it was just a smudged piece of paper before. It was just basically a quote unquote ruined piece of paper. So anything I do is going to be an improvement. So it will give you that freedom. And the third benefit to having expired paper is that it's going to make you really intentional when you shop for supplies, because you're not going to want to buy an excessive amount of things that might go bad. Now, I am a big proponent of stocking up if it's a product you know you're going to use when the price is great. If you know you love white Prismacolor pencils and you see a great deal on a box of 12, stock up. That's going to last forever. Pencils don't go bad. I've never had a pencil go bad, in my opinion. Maybe somebody has had that experience, but I haven't. Oh, by the way, what I'm doing right here is I'm just mixing a little bit of Brush and Pencils titanium white powder, which is basically ground up white pencil, with a touch-up texture, which is an adhesive that you can use to bring tooth back to your colored pencil, and and that makes up an archival white highlight, and I'm going in and I'm adding white highlights with that product. You could also use a paint pen or a gel pen. The only caveat is that that's not archival, basically meaning it could flake off, it could scrape off. It's unlikely to happen if you have it framed behind glass, but if it's in a sketchbook, or if you're not sure who's going to handle or frame your painting, or you want to go over it again with colored pencil, a gel pen will probably scrape off. I can color over those white areas with a colored pencil and it will still stick. So it's a nice product. I wouldn't say it's essential, but it's really nice. I actually bought all the brush and pencil products except for their paper. That wasn't out at the time that I bought them. Thinking that the powder blender would be what I would use all the time. I hardly ever use the powder blender, but I'm always using the touch-up texture and the titanium white. And I like the fixatives too, but they're kind of pricey for what they are, in my opinion. But touch-up texture and titanium white are really wonderful if you're serious about colored pencil, in my opinion. But, not essential. Take it with a grain of salt, right? So now I'm redefining my blacks with that black brush pen again. I just really like that. I like that I can press it down for wider lines and I can work on the tip for fine lines. And I think it worked pretty good. And if you get to it quick enough before it dries, you can spread it out a bit with a wet brush, a damp brush. So it's water soluble until it dries, then it's completely permanent, which I think is really nice in a situation like this. Now, luckily the sizing on this paper isn't so bad that my ink and paint bled through to the next page because it is a block, but I was able to salvage it and I feel pretty good about that, and hopefully this will give you a little more insight on what you can do with paper where the sizing has gone bad. Like I said, if you would like a real-time version of this tutorial, you can find it up now in Critique Club. Critique Club is $5 a month and you get access to all of the tutorials I have posted over the past 5 years in Critique Club, and you get to upload your work for feedback from me. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye!